Welcome to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. I'm Richie. I'm going to be your host. Throughout the series, we're going to talk to a range of different people who will give you tools and tips to help manage your recovery. The podcast itself is being brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation, who are a national charity who support people to rebuild a positive life after gambling harm. So today on this episode of the Recovery Toolkit podcast, we are joined by Ria, and I'm very excited about this because me and Ria go way back. We used to work together, which when we actually realised we're both in recovery was a bit of one of them moments where you go, this is great because we've got something much more in common than we probably ever thought we did. With that, Ria, tell us a little bit about your journey. Why are you in recovery? Why are you on this podcast today?
So I'm in recovery from alcoholism. I'm getting to about 4 years sober now, which is something I thought I'd never get to be honest. And I'm guessing that's probably why you've kind of asked me to come on and talk about that. Because,
Yeah, for me, I mean, I've took a vested interest from afar in your recovery, let's say.
Thanks.
So, like, you always do, don't you, when you see people that you know, and you kind of always want to make sure that they're all right and they're still on the right path, let's say. And the thing that's really grabbed my attention is all the different things you do now, and I see a lot of things and I'm like, oh, it's mint. Like, I just love it. So tell us a little bit about what your recovery looks like right now. So 4 years in recovery.
Yeah, so right now I have a full-time job. I've got my own car. I live in a nice flat. I've got a stable relationship. I've got a relationship with my daughter, with my parents. It's quite, I wouldn't say it was boring. It was quite serene. It's just, there's no chaos. There's no drama. There's just none of that stuff that just, there was always something going on in the past where it was just, there was always something. And I'd wake up and go, oh God, not again. Whereas now, I'm like, yay, brilliant. And now today the sun was shining. I got my washing out at the weekend. And I was like, these are the things that like I love about my life now, that I get the washing outside. Yeah.
And people listening to that might go, what's that all about? But in active addiction, them things don't even enter our head, do they?
Not even the wash. I didn't even do the washing, never mind hanging outside.
Yeah, and that's very common, isn't it? A lot of people are like that. What was the turning point? What was the day when you said, I've had enough? I need to do something about this.
I don't remember exactly what the day was, but it was in the first couple of days of 2020, and I had just come out of hospital after another suicide attempt that obviously wasn't a completion. And I had been, like, people had talked about recovery and stuff before. There's people very open around me about their own recovery. And I got in touch with one of them. And I had done in the past, I'd got in touch with them a couple of times, and then they'd said, oh, hey, go to this meeting. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I will. And then before I knew it, I was back out on the piss again. And then one day, I came out of hospital and I was like, oh, shit, I really haven't got anything left. What am I going to do? So they told me there's a meeting here, and I got on a bus and off I went. And that was it. It just, from that day, like, things really changed. I mean, it didn't all go to plan straight away, but, that's where it all happened.
What was the first impression going in? And when you see a meeting, I assume Alcoholics Anonymous?
Yeah, it was AA meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous. Honestly, I don't know. I don't remember, like, for a long time, I'd share in meetings about, like, going to this first meeting, and I couldn't even remember where it was. I could never go back to it, and I have since been back, and I realised, this is where my first meeting was. To begin with, I was walking in, I was a bit like, I was like, had my hood up, kind of hide, like, I can't possibly go into this room. Am I an alcoholic? I'd walked in and there was only 2 other women in there, and they were nothing like me. And then there was just like a load of old men, and I was just like, what is this? But I stayed, I sat down and I listened, and I cried a lot. And it was all just like, oh, my life is so terrible. All this self-pity that just, that was what, I didn't know what to think. I just went in and was just like, I thought that was it. Like, what has my life come to? I'm an alcoholic, or am I? I was questioning it and going, well, I'm nothing like these people. I'm not this like 50-year-old man. I'm a 30-odd-year-old woman. But at the same time, when I started listening, there was a lot of similarities, and I was like, oh, And it just sort of clicked in my head a little bit, only a little bit, because it took a little while to fully surrender to it. But yeah, that was it. I was just kind of like, fuck, what is this?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to swear? Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, swear. See, I think what we always talk about in our program at Epic Restart is be your authentic self. I'm probably too authentic sometimes. Is that possible? So swearing is definitely something that happens in my life. So
Yeah.
feel free to do that. When you went to them first few meetings and you were going through, the early days, and you said you didn't quite get it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, went to a few meetings, lapsed a little bit, went back out again, come back in.
Yeah.
What was it that kept you coming back?
Well, they kept saying, just keep coming back. So I was like, right, well, this is going to fix me. If I just go to meetings, that'll fix everything. And that's all I did. I just went to meetings. So I was like talking the talk, but wasn't exactly walking the walk. So I was doing some of the stuff they suggested, and it all just revolved around meetings. And looking back now, I can say that I was basically a dry drunk. I was doing everything the same. I just wasn't drinking while I was doing it. It was all just the same behaviours, but I just wasn't drinking until I was drinking again.
Yeah, and a lot of people talk about the dry drunk, and in any recovery, there's abstinence and then our-class recovery.
Yeah,
and there's
definitely.
two different things, isn't there,
100%,
really?
yeah.
And I think the realisation of self-awareness, it takes sometimes to go, oh, I'm not doing any work on myself.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think recovery is.
Yeah, definitely.
How do I learn about myself? So you got into recovery and you were abstinent.
Yeah.
So when did your real recovery start, do you think?
It was starting about June of 2020. So we were in lockdown, and I'd picked up a drink again because the sun was shining. Everybody was drinking. Everyone's having a great time. And I was like, oh, I can do that. I wasn't working or anything at that time, and I just thought, I'll just have one. And my partner was just like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I've been sober for 3 months. I'm obviously not an alcoholic. I can stop any time. And within days, I'd gone back to drinking gin and juice in a pop bottle. And I wasn't really spending much time with my daughter. She was there, but like I wasn't there. I was physically there, but I wasn't really there. And then as it kind of went on for a couple of weeks, I was like heading towards sort of some of the things that had been happening. So I set off, basically when I started drinking again, I ended up back where I ended. So I was ending up thinking suicidal thoughts all the time again. And it just got like, it was just ridiculous. So then I got in touch with some of the women that I'd spoken to previously when I'd first come in, as well as the person I'd spoken to when I first came in, and was just like, I don't know what to do. And then they directed me back to their Zoom meetings at the time because it was lockdown. And when I got into meetings that time, back into AA meetings, I like properly threw myself into it. I got myself a sponsor straight away. I was reading the literature. I was connecting with all these people that I'd never connected before. When people give you their phone numbers and like, ring me, pick up the phone before you pick up a drink and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah. But this time I actually did it, and it worked. Who knew? These things actually, when they're suggestions, but they work. So yeah, that's kind of when it.
And I love that, isn't it? The suggestions, but they're not really, are they? You haven't really got a choice, have you? You either do this or you don't, but you're going to end up back out there if you don't do it, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I think that's the power of it. You mentioned a few things there. Connection. I think that for me is one of the most important things in recovery.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that you find people that you can connect to.
Yeah.
What was that like, trying to find these people who now probably the people that helped you save your life, really?
Oh my goodness, the people I've got around me in recovery now, like I've never had friendships or relationships like it. But when I first came in, I was still full of ego. Do you know what I mean? Like, first of all, I'm not like you. How can I possibly? I'm obviously better than you. I mean, I had a high ego, low self-esteem. And then I joke that now I've come into recovery and stuff, I just have low self-esteem and no ego. But that self-esteem as I go through recovery is improving. But it's like connecting with people, because for a long time, like particularly with women, I would either think they wanted to sleep with me or they were just jealous of me. And that would be what it was, or they thought they felt threatened by me and things like that. So I didn't really talk to women. And for men, it was just like, what can I get out of them sort of thing. And then when I really started working the program properly, I realized actually these women are amazing women that have been through so much stuff that we can help each other. And now they're the closest friends I've ever had. I've got some amazing friends that are like allies outside of recovery, but the women that I'm with like all the time, I talk to daily in recovery, I've never known anything like it. The honesty is a big thing, and that connection is just, so if I don't get to a meeting, I don't go to meetings every day anymore, but I don't feel like I need to anymore because I've got that recovery sort of network around me. So it feels like a meeting all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people to hear, isn't it? I was told when I come out of rehab, 90 meetings in 90 days, 120 odd meetings, it's like the only place on the planet I feel safe. So I'm just going to do it all the time. And eventually that need changes, doesn't it? Because you start working on yourself, you start getting other things back in your life, and then you don't have to do it every day. But what I did do was still speak to people every day. And my kind of, what is an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting? What is an NA meeting? What is a GE meeting? Basically, it's two people that have the same problem talking to each other.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Just
so that
sharing
can be,
your feelings and all that.
be on the phone, it can be on a Zoom meeting, it can be face-to-face.
Yeah, definitely.
So actually, I probably still have a meeting every day because I speak to somebody like that every single day. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
I don't physically go to a time or place or anything like that, but I'm still speaking and connecting to people.
Yeah.
And that changes, doesn't it? So when people say, I'm going to have to go to meetings for the rest of my life, that might be true, but the meetings look slightly different now, and sometimes that's easier for people to get on board with, I think.
Yeah, I think as well when it comes to going, I've got to go to a meeting every day. Now things have changed that I get to go to meetings. Like I feel so privileged to even be alive that for a long time, like I just wanted to die. I didn't want to be, I say I wanted to die. I just didn't want to live the way I was living, but I didn't know any other way. So killing myself was the only way to kind of get over it all. So I feel really privileged and grateful to be able to go to meetings, and like you say, having them in different ways. So like it'd be a WhatsApp group with my friends or whatever, and all that kind of connection that way. It's just, it looks different now because it's just a bridge to normal living, isn't it? That's what they talk about, like meetings and stuff. Like, so when I first started, I wasn't working, I wasn't employable. I just went to meetings. That's all I did. I did that as my job until I was able to do something else as a job, like an actual job.
Yeah, and that's like, it's amazing, the journey, isn't it? And that's what I say to people all the time is, you've just got to do what you need to do at any given time. And who knows when that action or thing changes.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's what I'm hearing from you is, that's what I was told to do, so that's what I'm going to do. And then you got a job. Yeah?
Yeah.
How long did that take?
I must have been in maybe 2 or so years in recovery, and I actually ended up getting a job in the place where there's a lot of meetings that happen in Newcastle. Yeah. They had a cafe at the time, and I just got a job working in that cafe. And then I got a different job working somewhere else, like during the summer. So probably about 2 years, I think. I really, really focused on my recovery in that time, though. Was it even that long? I don't even know. It all kind of blurs into one because it was all part of lockdown and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't overnight, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important. Is you don't have to rush it, do you? How long does it take? Doesn't really matter, does it? Yeah. You do what you need to do. In those early days, when them first, few months, few years of being in recovery, because that's still early.
Yeah, I still feel like I'm in early recovery now, 4 years in. Yeah, I still feel like I'm still finding my feet.
Yeah. So meetings and connection. What else was really important here at that time?
To be honest, that was it. That's for the first few months and stuff. That was it. As long as I wasn't picking up a drink one day at a time, then that was a success in my eyes. I just, I put my head on the pillow on a night time and was just like, right, that's another day done. Wake up, let's do it all over again. And it just kind of like, so I was just doing either Zoom meetings or I started going out walking. And I started kind of thinking maybe some of the stuff because I used to be like really active in the job we used to do with the council and stuff, being really active and things like that. When my drinking got really bad, like all of that stuff just stopped. So I started kind of getting back outside. So when we could go on our daily walks and stuff, I'd go for a little walk, and that would be like, oh, this is nice. And I'd start noticing things. I'd listen to a Zoom meeting while I was walking, but it all basically revolved around meetings and connection with other alcoholics at the time. That's all I had. Yeah.
So before your drinking got really bad, you were quite active. You'd done a lot of physical activity, running. Yeah. And that all went by the wayside, but you then eventually got that back.
Yeah.
How long was it, do you think, before you started really throwing yourself into that a bit again?
Well, I mean, I say before my drinking got really bad, I was drinking a lot while I was still running. I was doing things like daft things, like doing like the Great North Run or the London Marathon, like half cut, and things like that, and thinking it was a funny idea. When I started back into recovery, when I started in recovery, sorry, I started the Couch to 5K, and I went right back to basics. And because I wasn't working, I could put everything into it. So I started the Couch to 5K, and then I went basically in 16 months. I went from couch to marathon, and I can't remember which marathon it was. It might have been in Liverpool, I think. It was the last rock and roll marathon they'd had. So 16 months is basically like started doing Couch to 5K, ended it with a marathon, and haven't stopped since.
I love that as well. How do you tell someone you're an addict without telling them you're an addict?
Oh, don't worry. Yeah, you just see what else you're addicted to.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I laugh because I've got a really strong group of friends. There's 12 of us that do pretty much all kinds. We're training for a marathon now.
Nice.
And some of them have managed their training and recovery and life, and others are just, I'm running a marathon, and everything else goes by the wayside. Yeah. So it's been interesting to see the differences between the lads that are in my group that are throwing themselves completely into it, and then others that are managing it probably a little bit better in terms of recovery. But you've got to do what works, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I first started doing it, it was a distraction to start with. I was still doing meetings and things, but all it was at the time is because that compulsion to drink was still there. It was just doing anything to kind of just take my thoughts away from that. Whereas now that compulsion is gone. I do it just because I love it.
Yeah, that's mint. I love that. And I'm a firm believer in one of the sayings that really stuck to me is where your attention goes, your energy flows. Mm-hmm. So early recovery for people is like, don't drink, don't gamble, don't take drugs, whatever it is, don't do.
Yeah.
And at some point you have to flick the switch, don't you? Because if you're just constantly focusing on what you don't want to do, you're constantly thinking about it still.
Yeah, definitely. People, we talk about being an alcoholic and stuff, and the place and the time that I think most about alcohol is when I'm at an AA meeting. When I'm outside of an AA meeting, I very rarely think about it because it's not it's just, it used to be a coping mechanism for how I dealt with life. Like life for me at the time was unbearable. I couldn't manage it. I couldn't cope with it. I couldn't cope with being a mom. I couldn't cope with a job. Relationships they were non-existent. I just couldn't do it. And just life generally was just too much. So my way to cope with it from quite a young age was to drink alcohol, and it masked all of my insecurities, a load of, all of these kind of things. It just hid it all. And I was able to get through life until it didn't work anymore, and it started taking away from me all of those things I thought it was giving me. And I ended up being like alone, like nobody wanted to be around me. I didn't want to be around me. And then now it's not like that, so it's quite good.
Yeah, and that's the bit, isn't it? It doesn't always have to stay like that. Mm-hmm. There is a way, there's a solution.
Yeah.
And your solution has been 12-step recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like working the steps?
I did them really slowly. So they talk about, I've finished the steps. You don't ever finish them. You do them like all day, every day. Like I do all 12 of them every single day of my life. I don't do them perfectly. I still have things where I feel jealous. Like they talk about defects of character, which I don't really like because I already felt defective in the first place. But they're kind of less useful character traits is what me and my sponsor kind of came up with. That being jealous isn't useful to me. I can be happy for somebody and be a little bit like, I can use them as aspirations instead of being jealous of them, and I can be happy for them. So it was difficult to begin with. There's like some of the steps where you've got to be brutally honest with even just one other person, but for a long time I couldn't even be honest with myself. So being honest with somebody else was nigh on impossible. But I did it. I worked my way through the steps. It took me about 2 years to get through them, like round the first time. And I live them every day. It's like being able to admit when I'm wrong is a huge one for me. Like being able to apologize I work with children now, like young adults and stuff, like in a secondary school, and being able to admit when I've done something wrong to them, to my daughter when if I've messed up something, there's been a miscommunication, being able to go, oh yeah, actually that was my fault, I'm really sorry, rather than being like, I'm the grown up, I'm always right. Because I'm going to get things wrong and I want people around me to understand that it's okay to be wrong. And that was the biggest thing for me, is being able to admit that. And the other thing through it was like them, when I talk about making amends, I thought in my head, when you think about it, watching TV and stuff, that you're just going to go and like, you've got to go up to everybody and be like, I'm really sorry about all those things I did. And that's not necessarily the case. Some of it can be like living amends. And that's been a huge thing that I keep doing every day. So it was hard, to be honest, but once you get through them, and it just becomes part of life now for me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I totally relate to that as well, because in active addiction, you tell people all the time, I'm going to do this and I'm going to stop and I'm going to move on and I'm not going to be a twat, basically. That was me. Yeah. I'm not going to be a twat anymore. So when you get into a recovery, early recovery, and then you go up to somebody and you say, look, can I sit down? I want to say I'm sorry. And they just go, yeah, whatever. I've heard it all before, don't they?
Yeah.
And that living amends is something that people have to do every day of life, isn't it? What is the actions that you're going to take? What are the behavior? What are the habits you're going to have in your life today that show everybody else, in my case, I'm not the twat anymore?
Yeah.
You know, the thing I've got to be careful of is when the twat shows back up.
Yeah.
Which happens.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's perfect. And the self-awareness it now takes to be able to sit there and go, what's going on? Because this isn't my normal behavior. And that's the hard bit, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. I think as well, that to go back to connection and stuff, is having people around me that can call me out on my shit. Because sometimes those resentments that I've got against people can sometimes, they eat away at you, and it can make me go back to those old behaviours. But luckily, because I've got people around me who know that I'm trying and they know me well enough, they'll be like, they can see it and they'll be like, right, that's what you're doing there. And I reckon it's because of this. What are you going to do about it? And sometimes it's like, oh God, I hate that you can see that, but they can see right through me, because before I was just so devious and I would lie about all sorts of things, like ridiculous things as well. It would just be stupid, but I just couldn't be honest with anybody about anything. So yeah. I'm just glad that I can be now. Now, to be fair, to the point where sometimes I may be overly honest. Yeah. I can't. It makes me uncomfortable to lie.
And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, isn't it? The overshare, or the share stuff that they haven't actually worked through yet. You know, something I really, really encourage people to make sure they do is work through the problem before they share it. You know, and working through it might be with one other person, but don't put it out there. Don't be putting it all over social media. Don't be doing interviews with the press. And first time I ever say something is putting it out there for the world, because it makes you vulnerable, and actually it triggers you as well sometimes when you've got to work through it. So yeah. Making sure that you do actually work through your shit is what I like to say to people. Make sure you work through your shit before you start talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in meetings, it's safe to do that. You can kind of get it past your teeth and all that, because it's going to stay in that room. But if you're going to share it outside, because sometimes, like you say, it triggers you and you end up just like breaking down, and you haven't dealt with any of it. But doing it out in this open forum, I'm not going to lie, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's once you feel, I think I'm starting to feel a lot more comfortable in it, in my own recovery, and I'm quite pleased that you've asked me to come and like talk about it, because yeah, I'm quite proud of how far I've come, so it's nice to share it.
What's it like sitting there saying I'm proud of how far I've come?
It sometimes feels a bit like, oh my God, what a narcissist. But I felt, like I said before, about having that high ego, low self-esteem. Like, it is that it's not ego anymore. Like, I know that I've genuinely been doing the next right thing as often as I can, that I'm in a job where I feel valued and I'm told that I'm valued because of the way I do my job. And I only can do that job because of what I've been through, because of like my lived experience and stuff like that. And it feels a bit uncomfortable to say I'm quite proud of myself, but at the same time, it feels quite nice.
Yeah, I think they're signs of growth, you know, and when people can say, I've done really well today, or I'm proud of myself, or I can see growth, you know, and I love asking people to come on this podcast that potentially have not done anything like this before, because it gives them an opportunity for more growth, doesn't it? You know, and when you said, yeah, I'll come on, and we met beforehand and you went, oh yeah, I'm dead nervous. I was like, yes, that's exactly what we want. You know, we want people to push the boundaries a little bit, you know.
This is definitely pushing my boundaries.
That's recovery though, isn't it? And that takes courage. And I think that's important, that you need a bit of courage in your recovery, or you just sit in that safe little bubble and survive.
Yeah.
And for me, it's about thriving. It's about, how do I push the boundaries a little bit so I can grow and become a better version of me,
Yeah,
whatever that looks like. You know, some of the things you spoke about in your exercise and that sort of stuff, they're things that you picked back up in recovery. Was there anything else that you used to do that you got back involved?
Not so much used to do. Like running and fitness and stuff was the main thing that I'd always done. But I started new things. So in the last couple of years, I got taught by someone in 12-step recovery how to crochet, which has been like I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's been life-changing. It's one of those few things that I've actually managed to like stick with, and like I love it. You know, when you pick, like I often go from hobby to hobby, whether it be like jewelry making or diamond art or whatever, but crochet is one that I've stuck with and I just love it. And I do it in meetings as well, and much to some people's dismay, I think, but it helps me listen. So if I could do it without looking, I would probably do it under the table, but I've got my little fidget instead. So.
And I love the fact that you found something that's worked for you, because some people have become, well, what do you get from that? You know, what is it that you get from it, do you think?
I don't know. It's one of those things that I can do while I'm doing something else. So I struggle to sit still. I struggle to kind of like stay focused on one thing. So it takes part of my brain away while the other bit can focus on something else. But I don't know, I feel like it's a little bit like my recovery, because crochet is just one stitch. And I remember talking about it in a meeting once about my higher power being like the crochet hook, because it's just like, this is a mess of yarn, and then you use the hook and it's one stitch at a time and it becomes something beautiful. And that's kind of how I feel about my recovery. I do one day at a time and I do the next right thing, and it's all these little things that build into something that I can be quite proud of. So I think for me, crochet, I know it sounds silly. It
really doesn't. And I'm smiling so much because that's the story you've created around it, isn't it? And I think if we create stories in a positive light for ourselves, they have meaning, and that helps us maintain it. That helps us stay on track. You know, I talk a lot about my recovery. I started playing golf. People say, what do you get into golf? And I was like, oh, it's just like my recovery. And they were like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, there's just loads of different aspects to golf, and you've got to continually learn new aspects, and you get a handicap and you've just got to get a little bit better, right? Each day, each time you play. That's the game. And then some days you're really shit. And, you know, and it comes back and you've got to deal with it and you've got to get over it. But actually, when you put all them bits together, it's beautiful. You know, and a nice round of golf. Like, you just play your handicap in golf and you're like, yes, you know, and there's a buzz. Yeah. And that's like my recovery. So it doesn't matter what the thing is. I think a lot of people relate to their recovery or find a way to create a story that helps them.
Yeah, definitely. I'd never even thought of that. There could be other things, because obviously I'm just so self-centered. It's all about my recovery. But to know that other people think of their activities in a similar way is just like, it just shows that, you know, we're all different, but we're all uniquely different. If that makes, we're all uniquely the same. Where we've ended up in the same sort of place.
Yeah,
and
totally.
We're finding things that are going to help us through. You know.
And that's the thing that I said before is, take your attention away from the things you don't want to do and put it on the things you do want to do.
Yep.
Create a positive vibe around them things, and, you know, you can go and do whatever you want, really.
Well, exactly, yeah.
That's the power of the mind, I think.
100%.
Something I ask everybody that comes on the podcast is, what's the 3 to 5 tools that you have in your toolkit that you live or die by?
Crochet, Diet Coke, and running.
Right.
It's probably the best ones. But also, like, I think, crochet. I definitely, wherever I go, I've always got a crochet hook and some yarn, because there's always a bit of downtime and I can just do a bit of crochet. Diet Coke, because sometimes drinking water is boring. I don't drink anything else, so I don't like coffee. So I'll always like to have a Diet Coke around. My running and my exercise is definitely a huge thing. So training for triathlons, and all of that kind of stuff, really, whether I'm training for an event or not, I just love exercising because of the endorphins and the dopamine and all that kind of stuff. Definitely the big things. And the other thing would definitely be connection. So my phone is quite an important thing, because at the end of that phone, not phone calls, because I don't like phone calls, but texts, I do texts, is a plethora of knowledge and experience and love that I can just connect to at any time. If I'm feeling happy, if I'm feeling sad, all those things, those feelings I had when I was drinking, I can get that from the people as opposed to having to pick up a drink to feel that way. So yeah, those things.
I love the fact you don't like phone calls.
I hate them.
Like, I hate them.
When you said to me about ringing you when I got here, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to have to ring you. And then I saw you and I was like, amazing, I don't have to ring him.
And I get massive anxiety around it sometimes. And when I've done a bit of work around it, I was always being chased for money by debt collectors, by, loan companies, all that sort of stuff when I was gambling all the time. So my association with speaking to somebody on the phone is they want something from us. And the other thing I don't like about it is you can't see the person. And that, I'm like, are they just saying stuff to us and like pulling faces behind my back? Or are they like, I don't know, sign language to them?
Yeah.
Cool stories in my head.
Mine's all about control. Mine's like, if someone has rang me, I'm not in control. But even if I ring them, I still don't feel in control of like how long the conversation's going to last or anything like that. And because control is one thing that I struggle to deal with, I totally understand.
I like it. I like that control.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
I just make sure that people know not to ring me. And then if they do ring me, I'm like, oh, sorry, I missed your call. But most people know now that it's better just to get me by text. I mean, sometimes like a phone call is way more appropriate, but most people will text me first and check that I'm in a position to be able to take a phone call, which I think is because I was able to talk to people about that. Whereas previously I would have just ignored them. I would have just, oh, it's not important. But sometimes what they want to ask is important. So I need to make that time for them. But they do it in a way and I do it in a way that makes it comfortable for everybody. But I wouldn't have known that about myself had I not found recovery. So
I like it. You've mentioned some of the things that you use in your recovery now. What would be the things you used in the early days? What if somebody was new into recovery, for example? What would you be saying to them? These are the things that you really need to.
The phone. Or honestly, when they say pick up the phone before pick up a drink, whether it would be a text or get onto a meeting or anything like that, is connect with other people in your circle. So for me, it was connecting with other alcoholics and just getting it past my teeth, whatever was in my head. Because they talk about that. I mean, that compulsion to drink for me, I would just act on it like straight away. I was really impulsive and I would just do things without thinking. Whereas now, or even in early recovery, being able to just to pick up the phone and text someone and say, I'm thinking about having a drink, that gave me that kind of pause, that little, just a breath to kind of, they talk about think. My first thought about anything is for entertainment purposes only. Like, no matter what is going on in my life, my first thought about it is not something that anyone should do ever, even now. So then I would think again and then think once more and it'd be like, right, okay, this is the right way to go. I think the biggest thing for me was having that connection and use the phone numbers that people give you, connect to other people in the same circle of whatever it is your addiction might be. And for me, it was alcoholics. Yeah,
definitely. I think the term we use in that is mind the gap, between stimulus and response is our greatest power.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
That is the power of choice.
Yeah.
And in that choice lies our freedom. And that's a Viktor Frankl quote. And I think I've probably said this on 3 podcasts already because it just sticks in my head so much. And that is the thing that once you crack that, you've got a chance, haven't you? Because it takes away that automatic, reaction all the time. And you get to respond to the thought.
Respond rather than react is just a huge thing that I wish I'd learned when I was like a child, but, it wasn't meant to be. But I can teach it now to the kids I work with and my own child, Yeah.
And that's like, it's amazing, isn't it? So active addiction for people affects so many other people around them.
Definitely.
Who's benefited from your recovery?
Oh my goodness. Like, not just me. My daughter has a better mom. My ex-partners have a better friend. So my ex-husband, who is my daughter's father, has a better co-parent now. We can actually co-parent. My parents have a better daughter. I'm actually a functioning member of society where I have a job that does stuff. I'm not just sitting at home getting pissed and going, oh my God, my life is so terrible. If you had my life, you'd drink too. I'm not a drain on the NHS anymore about, I'd end up in hospital after paracetamol overdoses, all of this kind of stuff that everyone has benefited, everybody, even down to people that I would never meet. If I was out in town, I would just if someone did something, I'd probably shout at them or I'd get involved in whatever was going on. And now I just I don't do that anymore. I mean, I sometimes hear a conversation, I'm like, ooh, I want to be part of that. But that's, I can now pause and not do that.
That's being human.
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
That's
it is.
being
Yeah,
human.
yeah, 100%.
That's got nothing to do with the addict.
Oh, absolutely not. But when I was pissed, I sometimes I would just say whatever, and it would cause offence and things like that. But yeah, everyone has benefited from me being in recovery.
And that's the ripple effect of recovery, isn't it? And I think it's really important to hear that, because when you enter recovery, you're like, I've no self-worth, I've got no confidence, I'm a drain on society.
Yep.
I'm telling myself all these stories, but actually through recovery, you find that all these other people are starting to benefit now. And that's amazing, I think. What are some of your biggest achievements in recovery?
In recovery, first of all, I'm sober today. They talk about only having 24 hours, and that's huge for me. Because when I first came in, I didn't think I'd get through a day because I was drinking every day. So that's my daily achievement. I think the other thing for me is, being able to buy a car was so exciting. I've been a job where I have enough money to be able to pay towards a car, and having a job, like a proper full-time job where I'm not on like a 0-hour contract. It's not a temporary contract or whatever. It's an actual proper job in a school. And I'm just like, how is this happen? How am I this person? I think that's probably my greatest. And the fact that my daughter feels safe enough to come and talk to me. She can trust that whatever I'm going to say, I'm going to do. Whereas before, she was almost an inconvenience. And I hate saying that. And I felt a lot of shame. I still feel a lot of shame around it. However, that was what the case, that was what it was. That's where my addiction took me. That, she wasn't the priority, but she is now. And I think that, they're sort of like my greatest achievements. Just kind of being alive.
Yeah, and that's massive as well, isn't it? All of the other things that come are secondary to you being a better version of yourself, aren't
100%.
And I think we've got to do that. I sometimes get resistance from people, and they say, "But I've been selfish my whole life because I've been in active addiction, and now you're telling us I need to be a little bit selfish now." And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what you have to do, because if you don't get anything else.
Yeah. They talk about us in 12-step recovery, like in AA, they talk about it being a selfish program. But if I hadn't have put myself at the top of the list and my recovery at the very top of every list I ever thought about, I didn't have anything else. Without recovery, I would be dead, which means nothing else would matter anyway. So I have to put my recovery first. And some people have found that quite hard to deal with. So there have been people in my life that have questioned, oh, you're going to too many meetings, you're not spending enough time with your daughter. And I've been able to put that boundary in and explain to them how important that recovery is, because I just wouldn't have my daughter with me if I didn't put my recovery first. So, and it's nice that they understand now, so they don't question it.
Yeah, and that's just society having an understanding of what's going on, or the people in your life now buying in. But I think they wouldn't have that if they didn't see progress. And I think that's one of the biggest compliments, I think, a lot of the time, is that actually people don't question that anymore, because they see the benefit that it brings us, and they see how my behaviours change, and they see how my habits are better. And, you said at the beginning you were with your daughter, but you weren't present. And now you're saying, I'm present, I'm there, I'm fully mum.
Yeah, totally. I love it. Ish. No, she's been.
For what's next? Where do you go next? You've got lots of other things I know you do as well.
I do, yeah. So I'm currently training for a Geordie Man triathlon, which is basically, it's a local poor man's Ironman. I don't have Ironman money. So it's just a Druidge base. It's triathlon, but like long course. So big long swim, big long bike ride, then a marathon, all one after the other. And that's basically all I do. I do a lot of training for those sorts of things. And I'm just like progressing in my job and just keep doing what I'm doing and going to meetings. And yeah, I get to go to meetings now. Like, it's a choice that I really like going. I like connecting with my friends at recovery. And swimming in the sea is another thing that I like doing. So I do a bit of that. But yeah, the next big thing at the minute is Geordie Man. And it's on my 40th birthday this year. So yeah, it should be good.
Yeah, and it's inspirational. I see your training runs, and you've just done a marathon yesterday.
I did a marathon yesterday, yeah.
Like the fact that you just come here, you've just walked across the bridge normally, you're not walking like you shit your pants, all that sort of stuff. I'm just like, wow, she just puts the time in, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's like your recovery, you have to put your time in.
100%, yeah, definitely.
These things don't just happen, Who who's been the biggest influence, or who has been the most important person in your recovery? Who does it come down to?
Well, it's me, isn't it? Like, I know that's like, again, as you were saying, I was thinking, is there another person? But it's not, it's me. As much as, like, I mean, I'm doing the work. I mean, for me, I trust my sort of 12-step program, and a lot of that is talking about spirituality and a higher power and things like that. And some people don't, they don't believe in certain things, and that's absolutely fine. For me, I trust in a higher power that it's going to be okay. But at the end of the day, it's me. It's whatever's within me. And without it, I haven't got anything else. Because, I tried really hard not to be around, and I just was really bad at that. So
yeah, so I asked that question. I had 3 other questions I was going to ask you if you didn't say you.
Oh, right, okay.
So the fact that you said you, for me, is it's great, because it's personal responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think on any program, doesn't matter what the program is, whether it's 12-step recovery, whether it's smart recovery, whether it's something else that your recovery looks different, that's totally fine. But you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to take responsibility for every action. Just like you Geordie.
Just a Geordie man, yeah.
Geordie man. If you don't do the work, you're not going to do it.
Yeah, I'm not going to, I have to do the training. Like, it's not something you can just do on a wing and a prayer, And that's what I love the training. The same as I love my recovery. It all just does, one day at a time, and it just keeps getting better.
The other thing I see you do a lot of is volunteering.
Oh,
do you
yeah.
Still do, like, park runs and stuff?
So I love parkrun. Parkrun's like one of my it's my Saturday morning ritual and my Sunday morning ritual if I'm not racing on a Sunday. So I've done 225 parkruns, and over that time I've volunteered at 100 and something different times. I volunteer at junior parkrun. It used to be when my daughter would go to parkrun for juniors, and I would drag her there really, but she doesn't like going. But I still like going because I just love seeing people be better versions of themselves. I love cheering people on. When I'm on the courses of whatever it is I'm doing, when I'm at parkrun, I just love seeing people try and be better versions of themselves. I love them succeeding and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's why I do what I do. There's no better feeling, is there, than just seeing somebody achieve something.
Yeah.
Seeing somebody, and for me, it's about seeing somebody achieve something they didn't thought they could do.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of recovery, full stop. But everybody's slightly different. And
Yeah.
them limiting beliefs that we have, that we place on ourselves, when people remove them, like, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah,
aren't they?
in the job that I'm in at school and stuff at the moment, like I have a lot of kids who are like that, and they're like, "Oh, I can't possibly do this," and then they do, and then the look on their face is. And when I was a swimming teacher for 20 odd years, and seeing kids come in that were terrified of even being on the pool side, to being able to get them in the water, the feeling I got from that was just, it was amazing. And now, like seeing them grow up and have this confidence that came from me teaching them to swim is just, it's extraordinary. I love it. And that's my new kind of high, I guess. That's why I love it.
There's what we get the buzz from,
yeah,
isn't it?
100%.
I think it's really important. And there's no shame in that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no shame in saying, oh, well, you shouldn't think that, you shouldn't feel that, it should be the way.
Yeah.
Of course it should. Be happy for other people.
Yeah.
And the other thing I love what you've said today is I get to do things now. And I think that's a massive mindset shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
I often take my kids to football, and the dads or mums say, oh, I'm here again. And I'm like, I'm buzzing, I get to do this, because I didn't have that good a relationship with my kids before I got into recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And even in early recovery, there still wasn't trust and stuff
Yeah.
there. So I didn't have that much. Now I get to do it. And the other thing that I had to do was reframe my active addiction, was like something that had to happen to me so I could come and do what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And that helps us just make sense of it, and without making that story up in my head, you don't know where you might end up.
Well, exactly. If I was to think about like everything that has happened to me and be like, oh God, it's happened to me, and I'd sit in self-pity and I'd sit in resentment, chances are I'd pick up a drink again. By sitting back and thinking, right, why has this happened? Doesn't matter. It just has, and here I am. What can I do with it? And that for me is what helps me kind of get better every day. And it is just one day at a time. Like, I only have today. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, today you've been on a podcast.
I know, it's so exciting. Oh my God.
But yeah, I love it. I love everything you said. I love watching on your recovery. I think you've got some real important tools that you use as well, which are quite unique. And I think it's important that people hear that doesn't have to be like he does, or doesn't have to be what she does.
Yeah.
Go and try stuff and find what works for you.
Yeah.
Is the message that hopefully people
And
get
I tried
from this.
lots of things.
Yeah.
And-
but you were willing, weren't you?
Yeah, that was it. When I first came into recovery, it was talking about being willing and having honesty. And if I had that, then I could do anything.
Yeah, I love it. But yeah, thank you very much
Thank you
for
very
coming
much
on
for
the
asking me.
podcast. It's been great to have you. And yeah, we'll surely touch base soon.
I would hope so. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. If you took something positive from it, then why not subscribe? If you or somebody you know has been suffering gambling related harm, why not head over to our website where you can join our community? The link is in the show notes.